Chapter 1, The Return. 3 years. To most people, 3 years wasn't a very long time. 3 years could disappear in the blink of an eye. 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases, 3 football seasons. For Donovan Hayes, 3 years felt like a lifetime. 3 years since everything fell apart. 3 years since the only person who had ever truly mattered walked away without looking back. The memory remained as sharp as broken glass. Donovan could still remember that night. The locker room had been empty except for him. His teammates had already left to celebrate another victory. The sounds of laughter and music echoed faintly from the parking lot outside. The championship trophy sat on a nearby table. The media had called him the future of football, the golden boy, the star quarterback, the kid who could do no wrong. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he sat alone on a wooden bench staring at his phone, at one message. One sentence, one text that had changed everything. I can't do this anymore. That was it. No explanation, no argument, no warning, no goodbye, just those 5 words. Donovan had called immediately. No answer. Again, nothing. Again, straight to voicemail. The panic had arrived first, then confusion, then anger, and finally, pain. The kind of pain that settled deep inside a person's chest and refused to leave. He never heard from Cadden Walker again, not that year, not the next. Not even after Donovan became one of the biggest names in professional football. Cadden had simply vanished from his life. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd stayed and fought. Because at least a fight would have meant Cadden still cared. Silence was worse. Silence meant abandonment. Or at least that's what Donovan told himself. For 3 years, the world loved Donovan Hayes. Sports networks couldn't get enough of him. His jersey became one of the highest selling in the country. Every touchdown made headlines. Every interview went viral. Every endorsement deal added another zero to his bank account. People called him unstoppable, invincible. A legend in the making. They saw confidence, success, perfection. They never saw the nights he couldn't sleep. The moments he found himself scrolling through old photos he should have deleted years ago. The way his chest tightened whenever he heard Cadden's name. Because despite everything he'd accomplished, he had never moved on, not really. And he hated himself for it. The news arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Donovan was halfway through breakfast when his agent called. Have you seen what? The Boston Bobcats. Donovan frowned. What about them? There was a pause. Then they named Cadden Walker their starting quarterback. Coffee mug froze halfway to Donovan's lips. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His heartbeat slowed, then accelerated violently. Cadden, the name sounded strange coming out loud, like something forbidden, like reopening an old wound. Yeah, his agent said. Apparently he's been climbing through the system for years. Nobody paid much attention until now. Donovan grabbed the television remote. Sports coverage filled the screen, and there he was, Cadden Walker, standing behind a podium, wearing a Boston Bobcats jersey, smiling for reporters, older, broader shoulders, sharper jawline, more confident, but unmistakably Cadden. Donovan stared. Every emotion he'd spent years burying erupted at once: shock, relief, anger, longing, heartbreak. All crashing together. His stomach twisted. The interview continued. Reporter asked Cadden a question. Cadden laughed. The sound hit Donovan harder than expected. Because he remembered that laugh. He remembered hearing it at midnight diners after practice, during road trips on rainy afternoons, in moments that now felt stolen from another life. The television suddenly became unbearable. Donovan turned it off, but the damage was already done. Cadden was back. And for the first time in 3 years, Donovan knew exactly where to find him. That night he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The lights below blurred together. His thoughts spiraled endlessly. Why had Cadden left? Why disappear? Why not explain? Had it all meant nothing? 3 years. 3 years of unanswered questions. 3 years of pretending he didn't care. 3 years of convincing himself he'd moved on. And now Cadden was back, close enough to touch. Close enough to confront, close enough to hurt. The realization settled into his chest. He wanted answers. No, that wasn't entirely true. He wanted revenge, or at least he thought he did. Because revenge sounded easier than admitting the truth. The truth was that he still loved him, and that terrified him. A month later, opportunity arrived. The trade discussions started quietly. A few rumors, some negotiations, nothing unusual. Professional sports was a business. Players moved all the time. But when Donovan learned which team wanted him, he almost laughed. The Boston Bobcats, the same team Cadden now played for. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. His agent called immediately. It's a huge opportunity. Donovan stared out the window. What are the chances? Financially, amazing. Donovan said softly. The chances? His agent sighed. Of what? That Cadden Walker ends up on the same team. A pause, then understanding. Oh, several seconds neither spoke. Finally, you don't have to accept. Donovan looked at the city lights, at the reflection staring back from the glass. A man who had spent 3 years running from ghosts. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to make Cadden answer, or maybe he was lying to himself. Maybe he just wanted to see him again. Either way, the decision was already made. Accept it. Media exploded. Sports analysts debated the trade nonstop. Fans celebrated. Commentators called it a career-defining move. A superstar joining one of the league's fastest-rising teams. Nobody knew the real reason. Nobody knew this had nothing to do with football. The cameras followed Donovan everywhere. Press conferences, airport arrivals, training camps. Headlines dominated social media. DONOVN Boston THE superstar ARIVSA new era BGNS. Everyone saw a professional athlete changing teams. Nobody saw a man marching directly toward his past. The morning of his first practice arrived cold and gray. Boston skis hung low overhead. Donovan stepped out of his car and looked toward the training facility. His pulse felt strangely uneven, ridiculous. He'd played in championship games before millions of viewers, faced elite defenses, performed under impossible pressure. Yet somehow walking into this building felt harder, because football never had the power to break his heart. Cadden did. The facility buzzed with activity. Coaches moved between offices. Players stretched on practice fields. Equipment managers prepared gear. Everything looked normal, everything felt wrong, because somewhere nearby, Haddon Walker existed, for the first time in 3 years, not as a memory, not as a photograph, not as a ghost, real, alive, close, too close. Donovan clenched his jaw. He could do this. He would do this. Practice began routinely, introductions, meetings, playbook discussions. Nothing unusual. Donovan almost convinced himself the reunion wouldn't happen today. Maybe Cadden was elsewhere. Maybe schedules wouldn't overlap. Maybe fate would give him another day to prepare. Then he stepped onto the field and saw him, across the grass about 50 yards away, talking with another quarterback, holding a football, laughing, completely unaware. The world stopped. The noise disappeared, the players vanished, everything narrowed to a single point. Donovan's chest tightened painfully. 3 years disappeared instantly. Every memory returned, every feeling, every wound. Every unanswered question. Cadden looked up and saw him. The effect was immediate. The smile vanished. The football slipped slightly in his grip. His face drained of color. For a second neither moved, neither breathed, neither looked away. The entire world seemed suspended between them. 3 years of silence hanging in the air. 3 years of unfinished words. 3 years of heartbreak. Cadden's eyes widened. Shock, disbelief, fear. Donovan recognized all of it, because he felt the same. Neither had expected this moment to hurt so much. Memories flashed between them. Late-night practices, secret smiles, shared dreams, promises whispered in darkness. The first time they met, the first time they kissed, the last time they spoke, everything existed in that single glance. Then reality returned. Voices, movement, footballs flying through the air, coaches shouting instructions. The world restarted. But something fundamental had changed. Because now they had seen each other, there was no going back. Cadden looked away first. A mistake, a weakness, or maybe self-preservation. Donovan wasn't sure. But watching him retreat reignited something dangerous. 3 years of silence, 3 years without answers, and Cadden couldn't even hold eye contact. Anger surged through him. Good, anger was easier, anger was safer. Anger kept him from remembering how beautiful Cadden still looked. Because he did, God help him, he did, older, stronger, more mature. Every year apart somehow made him harder to forget. Donovan hated that. He hated Cadden, he hated himself. Most of all, he hated the fact that one look was enough to destroy every defense he'd built. The coaches finally gathered everyone together. Players formed groups, introductions began. Donovan barely listened. His attention remained fixed on one person. Eventually the moment arrived. The head coach gestured. Cadden, Donovan, over here. Neither man moved immediately. The hesitation lasted less than a second, but everyone noticed. Both quarterbacks approached step by step like opposing forces heading toward collision. The closer they got, the harder it became to breathe. 10 feet, 5 feet, 3. And suddenly Cadden stood directly in front of him, close enough to touch, close enough to remember, close enough to hurt. The silence stretched, awkward, heavy, dangerous. The coach smiled obliviously. You two should get along great. If only he knew. Cadden swallowed. His voice emerged quieter than expected. Donovan, 3 years, and somehow hearing his name from Cadden's lips nearly shattered him. Donovan forced himself to smile, a cold smile, a cruel smile, the kind designed to wound, because if he didn't attack first, he might forgive. And he wasn't ready for that, not yet, maybe not ever, so he tilted his head slightly, met Cadden's gaze, and delivered the first shot. Miss me, the words landed exactly as intended. Cadden froze, every ounce of color disappeared from his face. Pain flashed across his expression, raw, unprotected, real. For the first time since the breakup, Donovan felt a small sense of satisfaction. Good, let him hurt. Let him understand what abandonment felt like. Let him suffer the way Donovan had suffered. The silence that followed seemed endless. Around them, practice continued. Nobody understood the war that had just begun. Nobody realized those 2 words carried 3 years of heartbreak, 3 years of anger, 3 years of longing disguised as hatred. Cadden opened his mouth, closed it again, no answer came, and somehow that hurt worse, because even now, even after all this time, neither of them knew what to say. The coach interrupted before either could continue. All right, enough standing around, let's get to work. Spell broke, players dispersed, meetings resumed, practice continued, but nothing felt normal anymore. Not for Donovan, not for Cadden, because the reunion they had both secretly feared had finally happened, and it had gone exactly as badly as expected, maybe worse. As Donovan walked toward the drills, he could feel Cadden's eyes on his back, watching, waiting, remembering the same way he was. The same way they both had for 3 long years. The game had begun, not the one played on football fields, not the one broadcast on television, not the one fans cheered for every Sunday, no. This was something far more dangerous. A game of unfinished love, broken trust, buried secrets, and wounds that never truly healed. One of them wanted answers, the other carried regrets. Neither was prepared for what would happen next, and neither realized that Boston wasn't simply giving them a second chance. It was forcing them into a collision course that would change everything again. Chapter 2. Old wounds, new rivals. The first week was torture, not because of the training. Not because of the endless meetings, conditioning drills, or the pressure that came with playing for the Boston Bobcats. For Donovan Hayes, those things were easy. The torture was Cadden. Everywhere he looked, Cadden was there. Across the locker room, in team meetings, on the practice field, in film sessions, at press conferences. 3 years without seeing him. Now Donovan couldn't go 3 hours without hearing his voice. Fate apparently had a twisted sense of humor. The worst part, Cadden seemed determined to avoid him. Whenever Donovan entered a room, Cadden found a reason to leave. Whenever their schedules overlapped, Cadden conveniently became busy. Whenever they accidentally found themselves alone together, Cadden escaped before a conversation could begin. At first, Donovan found it amusing, then irritating, then infuriating. Because if Cadden truly didn't care, why avoid him? Why look nervous every time their eyes met? Why act like Donovan was a ticking bomb? The answer should have been obvious. But Donovan refused to consider it. Instead, he convinced himself of a simpler explanation: cowardice. Cadden was a coward, and cowards ran. Thursday morning arrived with rain. The practice field glistened beneath dark clouds. Players jogged through warm-ups while coaches barked instructions. Donovan was throwing passes when he noticed Cadden watching him. Not casually, not professionally, watching, studying like he couldn't help himself. The realization sent an unexpected spark through Donovan's chest. For a brief moment, something dangerous resurfaced. Hope. Then Cadden looked away, and hope transformed instantly into anger. Enough. If Cadden wanted to keep running, fine, but Donovan was tired of chasing ghosts. When practice ended, he made a decision: no more avoidance, no more distance, no more pretending. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The locker room slowly emptied as players headed toward the showers. One by one, conversations faded, footsteps disappeared. Until only two people remained: Donovan and Cadden. The silence felt heavy. Cadden was sitting at his locker, staring at the floor. Donovan stood across the room, watching him, waiting. Eventually Cadden noticed. Their eyes met. Immediately, tension filled the air. Donovan, don't. Cadden stopped. The single word landed like a warning shot. Donovan crossed his arms. 3 years of questions pressed against his ribs. 3 years of anger. 3 years of sleepless nights. 3 years of silence. Finally, he asked the question that had haunted him. Why? Cadden looked away. Of course he did. Donovan, no. His voice echoed through the empty room. You don't get to do that. Cadden's jaw tight. Do what? Act like this is normal. The words came faster now, sharper, harder. You disappeared. Cadden flinched. Donovan noticed and hated himself for noticing, because a small part of him still cared, a part he desperately wanted dead. You left, Donovan continued. You vanished without explaining anything. Cadden remained silent. The silence only fueled the fire. I deserved an answer. You did. Response surprised him. For the first time, Cadden looked directly at him. Pain filled those familiar blue eyes. Pain and guilt, a dangerous combination. Then why didn't I get one? Cadden opened his mouth, closed it, looked away again. Donovan laughed bitterly. Right. The old frustration returned immediately, because even now, even after 3 years, Cadden wouldn't talk. That night, Cadden couldn't sleep. Not that he'd been sleeping much lately. The return of Donovan Hayes had destroyed whatever peace he'd built over the years. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering, always remembering, 3 years ago. The championship season, the secret relationship, the impossible choices, the lies. God, so many lies. Back then Donovan believed football was everything, his future, his dream, his entire life, and Cadden had loved him enough to sacrifice himself. At least that's what he'd tried to do. The problem was that sacrifice rarely looked noble while it was happening. Most sacrifices looked like betrayal. And that's exactly what Donovan believed he'd done: betray him. Maybe he wasn't wrong. The memory returned whether Cadden wanted it or not. 3 years earlier, one conversation, one decision, one moment that changed everything. His father had been sitting across from him at the kitchen table. A stack of newspaper clippings spread between them. Every article featured Donovan, future superstar. Generational talent, America's next football icon. Cadden remembered the expression on his father's face: disgust. You think the world is ready for this? Cadden already knew what was coming. The answer was no. The world wasn't ready. The league wasn't ready. The sponsors definitely weren't ready. A public relationship would destroy Donovan's career before it even began. At least that was the fear. And fear was powerful, powerful enough to make people do terrible things. Powerful enough to make Cadden leave the person he loved. He squeezed his eyes shut. Even now the memory hurt, especially because Donovan never learned the truth. Cadden never gave him the chance. He thought disappearing would make things easier, cleaner, safer. Instead, it destroyed both of them. And now Donovan hated him. Maybe he deserved it. The next day brought media day. Hundreds of reporters filled the training facility. Questions flew nonstop. Cameras flashed. Microphones appeared from every direction. Most players hated these events. Donovan thrived in them. He always had. Confidence came naturally to him. Charm even more so. The reporters loved him. The fans adored him. The cameras practically worshipped him. Cadden watched from across the room and remembered exactly why he'd fallen in love. It wasn't the fame or the talent or the looks. It was the way Donovan lit up every room he entered. The way people gravitated toward him. The way he made impossible things seem easy. Cadden had spent years trying to forget that he failed completely. Question for Donovan. A reporter raised her hand. What has been the biggest adjustment since joining Boston? Donovan smiled. New teammates, new city. Simple answer, professional answer, safe answer. Then another reporter stood. What about Cadden Walker? The room immediately grew interested. Of course it did. 2-star quarterbacks, one team, potential controversy. The media loved controversy. How's that relationship working? Cadden froze. Across the room, Donovan did the same. Every eye turned toward them, waiting, watching, hunting. Donovan's smile never moved, but something colder appeared beneath it. It's great. The lie came effortlessly. We're professionals. Several reporters nodded, satisfied. The answer should have ended there. Instead, Donovan glanced directly at Cadden just for a second, then smiled again. We've got a lot of catching up to do. The words sounded innocent, only Cadden understood the threat hidden beneath them. His stomach dropped because Donovan was right, they did, and Cadden wasn't sure he was ready. The rivalry started accidentally. At least that's what everyone believed. One practice, one passing drill, one competition. The quarterbacks took turns throwing deep passes. Players gathered to watch. Friendly trash talk filled the field, nothing unusual until Donovan stepped forward. The ball exploded from his hand, perfect spiral, 60 yards right into the receiver's hands. Cheers erupted. Several players whistled, then all eyes shifted toward Cadden. His turn, the challenge was obvious. Cadden took the football, ignored the pressure, ignored the crowd, ignored Donovan. He launched the pass, the ball soared through the air higher, farther, perfect, touchdown. The team erupted. Now Donovan was starring, then smiling, the dangerous smile, the competitive smile, the smile that meant war. And for the first time in years, Cadden smiled back. Because football had always been their language, long before they fell in love, long before they broke each other's hearts, long before everything became complicated, they communicated through competition. And suddenly, without meaning to, they were speaking again. Days passed, then weeks. The rivalry intensified. Every drill became a contest. Every practice became a battle. Every meeting became a silent challenge. Who threw better, who learned faster, who led stronger. The coaches loved it, the team loved it. The media absolutely loved it. Stories spread quickly. UNOV vs KAD and the quarterback war. Boston's biggest competition. Fans debated endlessly online. Sports analysts chose sides. Nobody realized the rivalry had almost nothing to do with football. This wasn't about starting positions or statistics or championships. This was personal. Every throw carried unresolved feelings. Every victory carried old resentment. Every loss reopened old wounds. Neither man admitted it, neither needed to. The truth existed between them, visible only to those directly involved. Then came the storm. A real one. Heavy rain hammered Boston late one evening. Most players had already gone home. The facility sat nearly empty. Only a handful remained, including Donovan, including Cadden, of course. Because apparently fate wasn't finished tormenting them, Cadden emerged from the film room carrying notes. The hallway looked deserted until he spotted Donovan leaning against a wall waiting. Immediately his pulse accelerated. Donovan didn't move, didn't smile, didn't joke, nothing, which somehow felt worse. We need to talk. Cadden sighed. We already tried that. Donovan pushed away from the wall. This time you're going to answer. Intensity in his voice made Cadden's stomach twist. Because he deserved this confrontation. Maybe he deserved it for 3 years. What do you want me to say? The truth. Words echoed through the hallway, simple, direct, devastating. Cadden looked down because the truth wasn't simple. The truth was messy, painful, complicated. The truth involved fear, sacrifice, family, football, love, and mistakes. Too many mistakes. I can't. Donovan laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound. Of course you can't. Anger flashed across his face. That's all you've ever said. It's not that easy. Easy? Donovan stepped closer. Rain thundered against the windows. Lightning flashed outside. For a moment the world seemed suspended. Easy would have been a goodbye. Cadden's chest tightened. Would have been telling me you stopped loving me. The words hit like a truck. Silence followed, heavy, painful, dangerous, because Donovan had unknowingly touched the one truth Cadden could never deny. He never stopped, not once, not for a single day, not even now, especially not now. Their eyes locked. Something shifted. For the first time since the reunion, the anger faded, just slightly, enough for old emotions to surface. The ones neither wanted, the ones neither could control. Cadden looked exhausted. Donovan looked heartbroken. And suddenly they weren't rival quarterbacks anymore. They were just two people carrying the weight of 3 lost years. Neither moved, neither spoke. The distance between them felt impossibly small. 1 step, maybe 2, the kind of distance that could change everything. Again, then a door slammed somewhere nearby. Moments shattered instantly. Reality returned. Cadden stepped back first, fear flashing across his face. Donovan noticed, and anger immediately rushed back to fill the empty space. Right. His voice became cold again. Cadden flinched. Donovan saw it, hated seeing it, but couldn't stop himself. Good at that. Then he walked away, leaving Cadden alone in the hallway, alone with the storm, alone with the truth, and alone with the growing realization that eventually, the secrets of 3 years ago would have to come out. Because Donovan wasn't giving up, not this time, and deep down neither was Cadden. The collision they had been avoiding for years was getting closer, and when it finally happened, neither of them would walk away unchanged. Chapter 3. The Waterboy's Secret. By the middle of the season, the entire city of Boston was obsessed, not with the Bobcats' winning record, not with their playoff chances, not even with the fact that they now had 2 elite quarterbacks on the same roster. People were obsessed with Donovan Hayes and Cadden Walker. The rivalry had become legendary. Every practice clip went viral. Every sideline interaction became a headline. Sports analysts dissected their body language like detectives investigating a crime scene. Fans chose sides. Team Donovan, Team Cadden. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that underneath the competition existed something far more complicated than football. Something neither man had managed to escape. The only person who seemed completely unaffected by the drama was the team's newest Waterboy. His name was Noah Reed, 19 years old, skinny, quiet, always carrying a cart full of sports drinks and towels. Nobody paid much attention to him, which was exactly how Noah liked it. He kept his head down, did his job, stayed out of the spotlight. While the players chased fame and championships, Noah moved invisibly through the facility, listening, watching, learning, especially when it came to Donovan and Cadden. Because unlike everyone else, Noah knew there was more to the story, much more. Water. Donovan snapped his fingers after practice. Noah handed him a bottle immediately. Thanks. Problem. Donovan took a long drink. Sweat dripped down his neck. The practice had been brutal. Another day, another battle with Cadden, another exhausting attempt to pretend he didn't care. Across the field, Cadden was talking to coaches. Noah noticed Donovan starring. Everyone noticed Donovan starring. The quarterback just didn't realize it. You know, Noah said carefully, most people only watch someone that much when they like them. Donovan nearly choked on his water. What? Noah shrugged innocently. Nothing. The kid walked away before Donovan could respond, leaving him standing there with an uncomfortable thought. 3 days later, Donovan learned something strange. The discovery happened accidentally. Practice had ended. Most players were gone. Donovan was heading toward the parking lot when he heard laughter from inside the equipment room. A familiar laugh. Cadden. Donovan slowed. The door wasn't completely closed. Inside, Cadden was talking to someone. Noah, the Waterboy. At first Donovan thought nothing of it, then he saw Cadden smiling, not his professional smile, not his media smile, his real smile, the one Donovan remembered, the one he hadn't seen in years. Something ugly twisted inside his chest, jealousy, completely irrational. Entirely ridiculous and impossible to ignore. He pushed the door open, both heads turned, the atmosphere changed immediately. Cadden's smile vanished. Noah looked amused, which somehow made things worse. Interrupting? Noah asked. Donovan crossed his arms. No, a lie, obviously, just looking for something. Another lie. Cadden stood. I should go, and just like that he was gone, escaping once again, leaving Donovan irritated and Noah smiling. Why are you looking at me like that? Donovan asked. Noah leaned against a shelf. Like what? Like you know something. Younger man laughed. Maybe he should have looked intimidated. Most people were. Donovan Hayes had that effect, but Noah wasn't intimidated, not even slightly. Maybe I do. Donovan narrowed his eyes. Weird. Been called worse. For some reason that answer felt older than a 19-year-old should sound. Much older. Before Donovan could question it, Noah grabbed a box and headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, Donovan looked up. What? Noah smiled, a strangely knowing smile. Reason Cadden looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching. Donovan froze, his pulse jumped. Noah continued walking. As someone who spent years observing people, he glanced back. That definitely isn't hate. Then he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Donovan completely speechless. That night, Donovan couldn't stop thinking about it. Not Noah. Cadden, the way he'd looked during practice, the way he'd looked during meetings, the way he'd looked whenever Donovan wasn't paying attention. Had Noah been right? No, impossible. If Cadden cared, he wouldn't have left. If Cadden cared, he would have explained. If Cadden cared, then why did he always look devastated whenever Donovan mentioned the past? The question followed him into sleep. Meanwhile, Cadden was having problems of his own. Specifically, Noah Reed, the kid, asked too many questions, not directly, never directly, but enough to make Cadden suspicious, enough to make him uncomfortable, enough to remind him of someone. The realization struck during lunch one afternoon. Noah laughed, and for one brief second, Cadden's stomach dropped. Because he recognized that laugh, not Noah's laugh, someone else's, a woman, a memory, a ghost from years ago. Cadden stared. Noah noticed. But it wasn't nothing, not even close. The feeling refused to leave. The resemblance was subtle, a certain expression, a specific smile, a particular way of tilting his head, tiny details, things nobody else would notice. But Cadden noticed, because years ago he'd known someone with those same mannerisms, someone he hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades, his older sister. Emily Walker had disappeared when Cadden was 16, not literally, but close enough. She left Boston after a massive fight with their father, packed her things, walked out, never came back. The family never talked about her afterward. His father acted like she didn't exist. His mother cried whenever her name came up. Cadden spent years wondering where she'd gone. Then eventually, life moved on, or at least pretended to. Now looking at Noah, old questions returned. Questions he hadn't asked in years. Questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. The next week brought an away game. The team traveled together, players filled the airplane, coaches reviewed strategies, most people relaxed. Donovan did not, because fate had assigned seats, and fate hated him. His assigned seat was directly beside Cadden. Fantastic, just fantastic. The moment he sat down, tension filled the space between them. Neither spoke for 10 minutes, 20, 30. Eventually Cadden sighed. We're adults. Donovan stared straight ahead. Congratulations. Cadden rubbed his forehead. Can we stop doing this? Doing what? This. The word hung in the air. Donovan finally looked at him. What exactly is this? Cadden opened his mouth and closed it again, always with the silence, always with the unfinished sentences. Donovan laughed bitterly. There you go, I'm trying. No. Response came instantly. Avoiding. Cadden's expression tight. Everything is about you. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Donovan's eyes hardened. Immediately, like a door slamming shut. Right. Quarterback looked away. Conversation over, damage done, and Cadden hated himself because he didn't mean it, not even remotely. The problem was that Donovan had always been the one thing he couldn't talk about honestly. The game itself was spectacular. The Bobcats won, fans celebrated, the media exploded with excitement. But afterwards something unexpected happened, something that changed everything. The team returned to the hotel, players scattered. Some went out, some stayed in. Noah was helping equipment staff unload supplies when he noticed something unusual. A woman standing in the lobby watching, not the players, not the coaches, him, specifically him. Noah frowned. The woman looked nervous, almost emotional. When their eyes met, she immediately approached. Excuse me. Noah hesitated. Yes, the woman's hands trembled just slightly. Your name is Noah. His pulse accelerated. "Do you know that?" The woman swallowed. For several seconds she couldn't speak. "I've been trying to find you." Every instinct told Noah to walk away. Instead, he stood frozen. What? Tears appeared in the woman's eyes. "I know this sounds crazy. You're staring at me in a hotel lobby. Crazy is already happening." Despite the situation, she laughed softly, then reached into her purse, removed a photograph, and handed it over. Noah looked down. The world stopped. The picture showed a young woman holding a baby. The woman looked familiar, very familiar, too familiar. Because she looked exactly like the woman standing in front of him, and the baby looked exactly like Noah. "What is this?" The question came out barely above a whisper. The woman took a shaky breath, then spoke the words that changed everything. "My name is Emily Walker." Noah's heart stopped. Walker, the same last name as Cadden, the same last name he'd heard every day for months, the same last name he'd never thought much about until now. Emily's voice trembled. "And I'm your mother." Photograph slipped from Noah's fingers. The lobby seemed to tilt. Sound disappeared. People moved around them in a blur. Nothing felt real. His mother? No, impossible. His mother had died. At least that's what he'd been told his entire life. His foster parents told him that story. The agencies told him that story. Every document he'd ever seen told him that story. Yet the woman standing before him looked very much alive. Which meant one thing: someone had lied for 19 years. Someone had lied. Thousands of miles away from home, hours after a football game, inside a random hotel lobby, the foundations of Noah's entire life began to crack, and neither he nor Emily realized the biggest shock was still waiting, because if Emily Walker was truly his mother, then Cadden Walker wasn't a stranger. He wasn't just the team's quarterback. He wasn't simply another player. He was family, and very soon. Chapter 4: Bloodlines and Betrayals. Noah didn't sleep. How could he? One conversation had shattered 19 years of certainty. One sentence had changed everything. "Your mother." The words replayed endlessly in his mind, again, again, again. Each repetition felt more impossible than the last. Across the city, inside a luxury hotel room, Noah sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the photograph Emily had given him. The woman holding the baby, the smile, the eyes, the resemblance was undeniable. For the first time in his life, Noah was looking at a picture of his actual mother, and instead of feeling happy, he felt furious, because if Emily Walker was alive, then why had she abandoned him? The next morning, Emily returned, just as she'd promised. They met in a quiet coffee shop several blocks from the hotel. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Neither touched their drinks. Neither knew where to begin. Finally, Noah broke the silence. "You lied." Emily's face fell immediately. "I know. Entire life." Anger he'd been holding exploded. "My entire life I thought you were dead." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "I never wanted that." "Then what happened?" The question hung between them. For a moment, Emily looked like she might run. Instead, she inhaled deeply and told him the truth, or at least the version she'd carried for 19 years. "I was 20. Her voice trembled. Young, stupid, terrified. Noah remained silent. Emily stared into her untouched coffee. "When I got pregnant, my family exploded." Noah immediately thought of Cadden, the famous quarterback, the man everyone respected, the man who never talked about family. Emily continued. "My father cared about reputation more than people." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Some things never change." Pain in her eyes looked genuine, raw, old. "He wanted me to give you up." Noah's jaw tightened. "And you did?" Emily closed her eyes. "No." The single word surprised him. What? Her hands shook. "I fought him." Tears finally escaped. "I fought him every day." Slowly, painfully, the story emerged. After Noah's birth, Emily had struggled. Money disappeared. Opportunities vanished. Her father controlled everything, every decision, every dollar, every aspect of her life. Then one day she'd finally had enough. She packed her belongings, took Noah, and left. At least that had been the plan, but plans rarely survived reality, especially when powerful people became involved. "I went to work one morning." Emily's voice nearly broke. "When I came home." She stopped, unable to continue. Noah felt a growing sense of dread. "What happened?" Emily looked directly at him. The pain in her expression was unbearable. "You were gone." Silence, complete silence. Noah stared. His brain refused to process the words. "Gone. My father took you." The coffee shop seemed to disappear. Everything narrowed to those 4 words. "My father took you." "No." Emily nodded through tears. "He used his connections. Made people believe I'd abandoned you." Denial came automatically, instinctively, because the alternative was too horrible, too cruel, too unfair. Emily's voice shattered. "I spent years looking for you." Truth hit Noah like a train. Years, not days, not weeks, years. "I never stopped." Emily reached into her purse, pulled out a thick envelope, placed it on the table. Noah opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of photographs, newspaper clippings, private investigator reports, court documents, search requests. 19 years of evidence, 19 years of searching, 19 years of hope. The realization hit him harder than anything else. She hadn't abandoned him, she'd lost him. And there was a massive difference. Meanwhile, back in Boston, Donovan was having the worst week of his season. Not because of football. Football was going great, the team was winning, fans were happy, everything looked perfect. The problem was Cadden, again, always Cadden. Donovan hated it. Hated the way his mood still depended on someone who'd broken his heart. Hated the way every interaction felt loaded with meaning. Hated the fact that despite everything, he still cared. The realization became impossible to ignore after a simple practice injury. A linebacker accidentally collided with Cadden during a drill. Nothing serious, just bad timing. Cadden hit the ground hard. The entire team barely reacted. Players got knocked down every day, normal, routine, nothing unusual, yet Donovan was already moving before he realized it, crossing the field, ignoring everyone, reaching Cadden's side almost immediately. "You okay?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Cadden looked up, surprised. Yeah, Donovan nodded, then froze, because dozens of teammates were starring, including Noah, who looked incredibly entertained. Fantastic. Just fantastic. Donovan immediately stepped back, his expression hardened. Good, then he walked away, but the damage was done. Everyone saw, especially Cadden. Later that evening, Noah returned to Boston, quiet, distracted, changed. The revelation about Emily had left him reeling. Yet another question haunted him, one terrifying possibility. If Emily was his mother, then who was his father, and more importantly, did Cadden know? 3 days later, Noah got his answer, completely by accident. The team facility was nearly empty. Most players had left. Noah was organizing storage boxes when he discovered an old file cabinet. One drawer had been left open. Inside sat dozens of historical team records, newspaper articles, local archives, community documents. One photograph immediately caught his attention. A family picture, the Walker family. His breath caught. There was Emily, young, smiling, standing beside a teenage boy who looked exactly like Cadden. Noah stared. Then turned the photo over. A handwritten note covered the back. Emily and Cadden Walker, summer 2004. His hands began shaking. Cadden wasn't a coincidence. Cadden wasn't just someone who shared a last name. Cadden was Emily's brother, which meant the realization hit instantly. Cadden was his uncle. Oh my God. Whisper escaped before he could stop it. That's usually how people react. Noah jumped, spinning around. Cadden stood in the doorway, holding a sports drink, looking confused. Then concerned, then suspicious. What happened? Noah stared, words vanished. How exactly did someone tell a person they might be their uncle? The answer was, you didn't. Not casually, not standing beside a storage cabinet, not while your entire world was collapsing. Cadden stepped forward. Pale, Noah laughed nervously. You have no idea. Cadden frowned. What's wrong? For a moment Noah considered telling him right then, right there, getting everything over with. But what if Emily was wrong? What if there was some misunderstanding? What if revealing the truth destroyed everything? No, not yet. I'm fine. A terrible lie. Cadden clearly didn't believe it, but surprisingly he didn't push. Instead he glanced toward the photograph in Noah's hand. His expression softened. Wow. Noah looked down the family picture. Your sister? Cadden smiled sadly. Yeah. Answer hit harder than expected, because Cadden had no idea. No idea that the woman in the photo had spent 19 years searching for her son. No idea that son was standing directly in front of him. No idea his entire family history was about to explode. Miss her. The confession came quietly, almost absent-mindedly. Noah looked up. Cadden was staring at the photograph, lost in memory. We haven't spoken in years. Pain flashed across his face, the same pain Noah often saw whenever Donovan entered a room, the same regret, the same sadness. Interesting. Very interesting. What happened? Cadden laughed softly. My family. Answer carried enough bitterness to fill an ocean. Noah understood immediately, because family seemed to be the source of every disaster in this story. That night Noah met Emily again. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, no doubt. The moment she sat down, Noah asked, does Cadden know? Emily froze, the color drained from her face. No, never told him. Tears appeared immediately. Couldn't. Why? Emily looked away. Because some wounds remain painful even after 19 years. Your grandfather made sure of it. Answer chilled him. What does that mean? Emily swallowed hard, then revealed the final piece. After she'd left home, her father had done more than take. No, he'd destroyed the entire family. He'd convinced everyone Emily abandoned them, convinced everyone she abandoned her child, convinced everyone she disappeared voluntarily, including Cadden, especially Cadden. For nearly 2 decades, Cadden believed his sister chose to leave, just like Donovan believed Cadden chose to leave. The parallel was impossible to ignore. Both men had spent years hiding someone for a choice they never actually made. Across the city, completely unaware of the truth, Cadden sat alone in his apartment. A box of old photographs rested beside him. Something had compelled him to dig them out tonight. Maybe loneliness, maybe nostalgia, maybe fate. One photograph sat in his hands, Emily smiling. Arm wrapped around his shoulders. The last picture they'd ever taken together. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered something he hadn't said in 19 years. Miss you. Apartment remained silent, but somewhere in Boston, his sister was only a few miles away, closer than she'd been in 2 decades, and neither of them knew that their reunion was rapidly approaching. A reunion that would reveal lies, destroy secrets, and expose a truth powerful enough to change every relationship in their lives. Especially the one between Donovan and Cadden, because once the past finally surfaced, there would be nowhere left to hide. Chapter 5. The truth between us. The truth waited only a few miles away, yet none of them were prepared for what would happen when it finally arrived. Not Noah, not Emily, not Cadden, and certainly not Donovan, because some secrets don't simply reveal themselves, they explode. And when they do, they leave nothing untouched. 3 days later, the Bobcats were preparing for the biggest game of their season. The locker room buzzed with energy, players laughed, coaches reviewed strategies, reporters crowded the hallways. Everything felt normal, except Noah could barely breathe. He stood near the equipment room gripping a clipboard with trembling fingers. Emily had finally agreed, after years of hiding, after years of fear, after 19 years of separation. She was coming, today, to see Cadden, to tell him everything. And Noah wasn't sure whether he was witnessing a reunion or a disaster. Cadden had no idea. He spent the morning studying game footage, reviewing defensive formations, analyzing tendencies, trying very hard not to think about Donovan Hayes, which unfortunately was impossible, because Donovan was currently sitting across from him, looking infuriatingly attractive, and annoyingly distracted. Neither man had spoken much lately. The hallway confrontation weeks earlier still lingered between them. Neither willing to surrender, neither willing to be vulnerable, both exhausted, both hurting, both pretending otherwise. A knock interrupted the meeting. One of the staff members entered. "Coach," the head coach looked up. "What is it?" The staff member hesitated, then looked directly at Cadden. "Someone's here asking for you." Cadden frowned. "Who?" The staff member swallowed. "A woman." Room fell silent. Cadden stood confused, curious, uneasy. As he followed the staff member through the hallway, an inexplicable tension settled into his chest. Something felt wrong or maybe right, he couldn't tell. The closer they got to the lobby, the stronger the feeling became, like a memory trying to surface, like deja vu, like fate. Then he stepped through the doorway and saw her. Everything stopped, the world, the noise, his heartbeat, everything. For one impossible moment, Cadden thought he was hallucinating, because standing across the lobby was a ghost with familiar eyes, a familiar smile, a familiar face, 19 years older but unmistakable, his sister, Emily. The air left his lungs. "No," the whisper escaped involuntarily. Emily burst into tears. "Cadden." That was all it took. One word, one voice, one name. Suddenly 20 years collapsed, the distance vanished, the lies disappeared. And Cadden found himself moving before he even realized it, crossing the room, faster, faster, then stopping directly in front of her, staring, unable to believe what he was seeing. Emily looked exactly the way memory had preserved her, different, older, but still Emily, still his big sister, still the person he'd spent half his life missing, still the person he believed had abandoned them, the person he believed had chosen to leave, the person he had spent years trying to hate and completely failing. Cadden. Emily's voice broke. "I'm sorry." That single sentence shattered him, because suddenly all the anger he'd carried for years felt heavy and old and tired. "What happened?" The question escaped before he could stop it. "What happened to you?" Emily started crying harder, and Noah realized the moment had finally arrived, the moment everything changed. For nearly an hour they sat in a private conference room, just the three of them, Emily, Cadden, Noah, and the truth, the ugly, painful truth, every lie. Every manipulation, every stolen year. Emily told them everything. How their father had taken Noah, how he'd destroyed her reputation, how he'd convinced everyone she abandoned her child, how she'd spent nearly 2 decades searching, how she'd never stopped loving either of them. At first Cadden listened quietly, then disbelief appeared, then shock, then heartbreak, and finally, rage, pure rage, not at Emily, at their father. He lied. The words sounded hollow, broken. Like his entire understanding of reality had fractured. Emily nodded through tears. "Yes." Cadden laughed, a horrible sound. "He lied for 20 years. Made me hate you." Emily couldn't answer because it was true, and hearing it out loud hurt more than anything. Then Noah spoke quietly, carefully. "There's something else." Both walkers looked at him. He swallowed, his heart pounded. "Now or never, no more secrets, no more waiting, no more lies." Cadden, his voice shook. "I think." He took a breath, then finished. "I think I'm your nephew." Silence, absolute silence. The room became completely still. Nobody moved, nobody blinked, nobody breathed. Cadden stared. The words entered his ears, but refused to make sense. "Nephew." The word echoed repeatedly, again, again. Then realization hit hard, violently, overwhelmingly. His eyes shifted to Emily, then Noah, then Emily again. And suddenly he saw it, the resemblance, the smile, the eyes, the expressions, things he'd somehow missed for months. "Oh my God." Noah laughed weakly. "That was basically my reaction too." Cadden sat down heavily. The room tilted. His entire family history had just rewritten itself in less than an hour. Then something unexpected happened. Cadden started crying, not quietly, not subtly. Years of grief erupted all at once. Years of loss, years of regret, years of believing he wasn't enough for his sister to stay, years of blaming himself, years of wondering, gone, destroyed, replaced by a completely different pain. The pain of realizing it never had to happen. Emily crossed the room first, then Noah, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, the Walker family embraced, not completely healed, not completely whole, but together, finally together. Unfortunately, the universe wasn't finished, because someone else had heard everything. Donovan Hayes stood outside the conference room, frozen, unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe, because while he hadn't intended to eavesdrop, he had heard enough. Enough to understand, enough to realize something terrifying. Cadden hadn't been the villain, not entirely, not the way Donovan believed, not the way he'd convinced himself for 3 years. Because listening to Emily describe manipulation, fear, pressure, family control, sacrifice, Donovan recognized familiar patterns, patterns that suddenly made Cadden's disappearance look very different. For the first time, a terrible possibility entered his mind. What if Cadden hadn't wanted to leave? The thought followed him for the rest of the day, through meetings, through practice, through warm-ups, relentless, unavoidable, growing, because the more he considered it, the more things stopped making sense. Why had Cadden looked devastated whenever the breakup was mentioned? Why had he never defended himself? Why had he carried so much guilt? Why did he still look at Donovan like someone mourning a lost future? Eventually Donovan could no longer ignore it, so after practice ended, he found Cadden, alone, in the stadium tunnel, the same tunnel where players entered before games, the same tunnel where legends were made, the same tunnel where everything finally changed. Cadden looked exhausted, emotionally wrecked. His eyes red from crying, his posture heavy. For the first time in years he looked vulnerable, completely vulnerable. Donovan stopped several feet away, neither spoke. The silence stretched long, uncomfortable, necessary. Finally Donovan asked, "Did you want to leave?" Cadden froze. Every muscle in his body locked, because out of all the questions Donovan could have asked, that was the one he'd feared most, the one he'd prayed for, the one he'd never been ready to answer. "Donovan." His voice cracked. The reaction alone told Donovan everything. "Did you?" The second question came softer, not angry, not accusing, just hurt, and that somehow made it worse, because anger was easy, pain wasn't. Cadden closed his eyes, 3 years of silence pressing against his chest, 3 years of guilt. 3 years of regret, 3 years of loving someone from a distance. Then finally, he told the truth. No, one word, one simple word, and Donovan's entire world shifted. I never wanted to leave. Tears appeared immediately, unstoppable, unavoidable, honest. I thought I was protecting you. Confession hung in the air, raw, fragile, terrifying. Donovan couldn't speak, because suddenly everything hurt, the anger, the grief, the years they lost, the life they could have had. Cadden laughed bitterly, wiping tears from his face. Know how stupid that sounds, doesn't? Donovan's voice barely rose above a whisper. For a moment neither moved, neither spoke, neither looked away. 3 years, 3 wasted years, all because 2 people made decisions from fear instead of trust. And standing there in the tunnel, for the first time since the breakup, neither man looked angry, they just looked heartbroken. The distance between them felt smaller than ever, 1 step, maybe 2, the same distance that had haunted them since the day they reunited. But before either could move, before either could say another word, a voice echoed through the tunnel. 5 minutes to kickoff. Reality returned instantly. The moment shattered, the game awaited, the team awaited, the season awaited, but something fundamental had changed. The truth was finally out, and neither of them could pretend anymore. As Cadden walked toward the field, he glanced back once, meeting Donovan's eyes, not with anger, not with resentment, not with rivalry, with hope. And for the first time in 3 years, Donovan didn't look away. Chapter 6, second down. The stadium roared. More than 70,000 fans filled the stands. Blue lights flashed across the arena. Television cameras swept over the crowd. Commentators shouted excitedly into microphones. The Boston Bobcats had reached the championship game. The biggest moment of the season, the biggest moment of many careers. And for Donovan Hayes and Cadden Walker, the biggest moment of their lives, not because of football, because of everything else. 3 years, 3 years of heartbreak, 3 years of misunderstandings, 3 years of unanswered questions. And somehow everything had led here, to this field, to this game, to this final chance. Inside the locker room, players prepared quietly. Some stretched, some prayed, some listened to music, the usual routines, the familiar rituals. But today felt different, today felt bigger. Because everyone sensed what was at stake, not just a championship, a legacy. Noah sat near the equipment station, organizing supplies. The same Waterboy nobody had noticed when the season began. The same Waterboy who had accidentally uncovered decades of lies. The same Waterboy who now knew exactly where he belonged. For the first time in his life, he had a family, a mother, an uncle, a future. Across the room, Cadden was lacing his cleats. For once he wasn't thinking about football, he was thinking about Emily. After 19 years apart, they had spent every free moment reconnecting, talking, laughing, crying, healing. There was still pain, still anger, still years they could never recover, but they finally had the truth. And sometimes the truth was enough to begin again. Nearby, Donovan adjusted his gloves. His gaze drifted toward Cadden. The familiar ache returned. But it felt different now, softer, warmer, less like a wound, more like hope, because now he knew Cadden hadn't stopped loving him. Cadden hadn't left because he didn't care. Cadden had made a terrible choice, a painful choice, a choice born from fear, and while Donovan wasn't sure he could forgive everything overnight, he finally understood that understanding changed everything. Ready? A voice interrupted his thoughts. Donovan looked up. Cadden stood beside him. Neither smiled, neither joked, but neither looked away. Ready? Answer carried far more meaning than football, and both of them knew it. Minutes later, the team stormed onto the field. The crowd exploded. Thunderous applause echoed through the stadium. Fans waved signs, chanted names, celebrated heroes. The championship had begun. The first half was brutal. The opposing team came prepared. Every drive felt like a war. Every yard felt earned. Every mistake felt catastrophic. By halftime, Boston trailed by 10 points. The locker room felt tense, frustrated, anxious. The coaches adjusted strategies. Players discussed plays. Everyone searched for answers. Then unexpectedly, Noah spoke. The room went silent. Because Waterboys generally didn't give motivational speeches, Noah immediately realized everyone was starring, including the coaches, including Donovan, including Cadden. Sorry, he awkwardly laughed. He looked around the room at the exhausted players, the frustrated coaches, disappointed faces, and suddenly he knew exactly what to say. You know what second down means. Several players exchanged confused looks. Noah continued. Everybody celebrates first downs. A few heads nodded, and everybody remembers touchdowns. More nodding. But second down, he smiled. Second down is where you decide who you really are. Room grew quieter. First down is opportunity. Noah's voice strengthened. Third down is pressure. He pointed toward the field. But second down, a small smile appeared. That's the moment after something didn't go perfectly. Players listened, really listened. It's when you're not winning yet. He glanced around the room. It's when you could quit. His eyes found Donovan, then Cadden. It's when life gives you another chance to do it better. Silence, complete silence, because suddenly everyone understood not just the football metaphor, the deeper meaning, especially Donovan, especially Cadden, because their entire story had been a second down. They'd failed the first time, lost each other, broken apart, made mistakes, but now life had given them another chance. A second down, the locker room erupted. Players cheered, laughed, shouted. The energy transformed instantly. Even the head coach looked impressed. Kid, he pointed at Noah. Remind me never to let you quit. Laughter filled the room, and for the first time all day, everyone smiled, including Donovan, including Cadden. The second half began, and Boston came alive. Donovan played like a man possessed. Every throw landed perfectly. Every decision felt sharp. Every movement felt effortless. Cadden matched him, drive for drive, play for play, leader beside leader, not rivals, partners. The entire team rallied behind them. The score narrowed, then tied, then swung back and forth. With less than 2 minutes remaining, Boston trailed by 4 points. One final drive, one final opportunity. The crowd stood, the nation watched, history waited. Donovan led the offense onto the field 80 yards from victory. The pressure was enormous. First down. Short gain, second down. Donovan looked toward the sideline and saw Noah. The Waterboy smiled. Second down, the words echoed in his mind. Another chance. Donovan smiled, then called the play. The ball snapped. Everything happened fast. Defenders charged, receivers sprinted, the pocket collapsed. Then Donovan saw an opening. He launched the football. The pass soared through the night sky. The entire stadium held its breath. For one eternal moment, the ball seemed suspended between heaven and earth. Then catch, touchdown. The stadium exploded. Chaos, pure chaos. Fans screamed, players celebrated, coaches lost their minds. Boston had done it, champions at last. The final seconds disappeared in a blur. Confetti filled the air, cameras rushed the field, reporters chased interviews. But Donovan wasn't looking at any of it. He was looking for one person. Cadden. Their eyes met across the celebration. This time neither hesitated, neither ran, neither hid. The distance closed quickly. 3 years of pain, 3 years of longing. 3 years of regret, gone, not erased, not forgot, but finally faced, finally understood, finally healed. Cadden stopped in front of him. Emotion filled both faces. So, Donovan smiled. So, for a moment neither knew what to say. Then Cadden laughed softly. I missed you. 3 words, the words Donovan had waited years to hear. His eyes immediately filled with tears. Nodded. Every day. Answer shattered whatever walls remained. Donovan stepped forward, and this time, neither pulled away. The crowd continued celebrating around them, but neither noticed, because after everything they'd lost, after everything they'd survived, they had finally found their way back. Nearby, Noah watched with a smile, Emily standing beside him. You think they'll be okay? Emily asked. Noah laughed. No, she looked surprised. No, he shook his head. A grin spread across his face. I think they're going to be amazing. Emily laughed, the sound warm and free, a sound that had been missing for nearly 20 years. Together they watched the future unfold, a family reunited, a championship won, a love story restored, and somewhere beneath the noise and celebration, the true meaning of WERBOI second DOWN remained. Life rarely gives perfect first attempts. People make mistakes, they break things, lose each other, but sometimes, if they're lucky, life offers a second down, another chance, a chance to tell the truth, a chance to forgive, a chance to choose love over fear. A chance to become the person you were meant to be, and when that chance arrives, the bravest thing you can do is take it. The end.